Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Epling. Welcome to Sketches. Now Sketches is a small segment that Pike TV is providing for you, the viewer, to teach you a little bit about some shortcuts using art, supplies and mediums that are associated with drawing, painting, craftsmanship, and all the sorts. Now today we're focusing on something that I really find interesting, one of my absolutely favorite things to do when creating my own medium, and that's walnut ink. Now walnuts is a pretty good resource here in the mountains. There's a lot of walnut trees around. There's a good chance you've probably seen a walnut either in the stores packaged ready to eat, but you may have not seen them in their true form, which is in this husk. So inside of this husk that you see here is the actual walnut. Now this is the shell that can be broken up, and then inside that the nut can be eaten, and squirrels like this as well as humans and a lot of other birds. So walnut ink. So it's easily accessible. It's something that you can get anywhere, and with only a few things put together you can create your own ink. Now I know this looks a little off-putting at first. It may look like a little bit of chaw in there, maybe some tobacco spit, but this is actually ink. Now the color that's produced with walnut ink is a very pretty sepia color. Sepia is a color that is off brown. It's in between, I'd say, almond and, let's say, cherry. It's a color that many artists will go to great lengths to get in different forms of medium. So for instance, Prismacolor is a brand of alcohol-based markers. And if you see here, there's a range of color. This is all in the area in the family of sepia. Okay? There's also different types of watercolor inks that are really accessible. They're also of the same family of color. These watercolor paints, I called them inks a second ago. These watercolor paints are sometimes a little expensive. And if you were to go to the store and actually buy ink, let's say you went and bought a little supply of sepia, it's going to cost a little bit. So I say today we get our resources together and let's create our own ink right here at home in the mountains. So let's get started on what you need. Now some of the things you're going to need today, which are so important, is a pair of gloves, a bucket that you don't care to get stained or messy, and then you're going to have to go out and find some walnuts. Now that's what we need for the ingredients to create your own walnut ink, which is a really pretty sepia color that I think you'll really like using. So let's go ahead now and pick us out some walnuts. Now walnuts, when they lay on the ground for a bit, they come in a husk, and the husk starts to rot away. That rotting process of that husk removing from the actual walnut inside, that's what we want, because that gives us this gooey mess that sometimes you pick up when you're near a walnut tree and you get all over your hands and clothes that stains you. That's actually the exact ingredient that we need in order to make our own walnut ink. So the first step is to find some walnuts, look for the nice gooey ones, and start to collect those up and take in. Okay, now we're going to talk about the actual process of taking a walnut and transferring that into a medium. Now when we talk about medium, those of you that watch the art workshop here on Pike TV, you know what a medium is. A medium basically is anything that you use to create art with. So your medium could be crayons, watercolor, so on and so forth. Now we're creating a medium today. That means we're going to take one thing that exists in one form and turning it into another form. And in that form we're turning it into, we can use to create art. So what I've done is I've picked walnuts. Find a walnut tree. You want to find walnuts that still have their husks on them. They can't be green. You have to wait till they start to rot a little bit. And what happens is a walnut has an exterior shell, and then inside of that is the nut. So that exterior shell is what gives us the ink. When that starts to decay a little bit and get really gooey, that's when you can actually pull it in and start working with it. Now you want to use gloves when you're touching walnuts. Walnuts are very bad to stain hands or anything else they touch. That's why they make great ink. So here I have a batch of walnuts that I've put into a pot. You can see it's already starting to boil. You don't want to have it on a very high setting. You want it so that it actually just starts to steam a little bit like this is. You notice that it is boiling a little bit, but it isn't overflowing. Now those of you at home, parental supervision is very important with this. Don't start trying to cook walnuts on your stove. Now how I work it is I use equal part water with equal part walnut. So if you pour walnuts into a pot and it raises up to a certain level, pour that much water into the pot as well. I'm going to start to stir this a little bit so you can start to see at the top there's a filling that actually gets pulled off. And you can see that this water now is starting to turn into that really pretty sepia color that we like. Once this boils, you'll see some of the husks start to come off, actually start to pull off into the water. There's a leaf in there even, so we're really dedicated in getting some good color. Now, once this boils, I would say let it boil for about 30 to 45 minutes at least. And once that happens, we want to take this and strain it. So a strainer is just something like, it's a filter. And those of you at home who do any cooking, you know what a strainer is. So you take your pot, take it over to the stove, be very careful. And what you want to do is have some sort of a container underneath it, and then you start to pour your walnut juice into your container. Another thing you want to be careful about is the type of container you're using and how hot this is. So let it cool down before you actually strain it. After the straining process takes place, you want to add vinegar. Vinegar is an important element in this. What the vinegar does, now I'm not a scientist, so I don't really know how to describe this, but apparently there's certain tiny little elements in these walnuts that will continue to decay after you turn it into ink. So you may have to see some sort of a buildup of particles in the bottom of your ink. And what this vinegar does is it eliminates that. It actually goes in and it takes away that effect of it rotting. It's almost like, let's say, formaldehyde for walnuts. It's a bad analogy, but you can see where I'm going. So you add this vinegar to it. I would say for the vinegar, you want to pour at least 3 tablespoons worth into your mixture if you're using at least over 3 cups of ink. You'd be surprised how much ink you actually produce boiling up a big batch of walnut ink. But from there, you should have a medium that you could use and actually go and draw and use it with art. So there's a lot of different varieties of ways that you can actually get this color of sepia. Now, some folks actually call it sepia or sepia, or however you pronounce it's okay. But just remember, these are all sets of brown. Now, a lot of times in the art workshop, we actually talk about the varieties of color in a hue or a tone. And if you have a color wheel, it really helps you to define what color you're talking about. But for us, making walnut ink, we can't really determine what exactly that's going to look like because so much depends on the output, what you put into it. So for instance, the more walnuts that you use, the darker your ink will be. So on and so forth. These elements that matter, the water level that you use in your pot, all these things matter. So on this piece of paper, we have a variety of different examples of sepia. Over here we have our Prismacolor marker. Here we have our Copic marker. We also have a line of ink that is from the bottle. We have some watercolor here that I'm pulling out onto the page. And this is a spray that sometimes is often used to distress different things to make it look older, those sorts of things. So when you think of this color, you think of brown. Now I'm going to show you exactly how this color works. I'm going to be using actually walnut ink right now to draw a little bit so you can see the exact tone we're looking at. Now like I said, if I was to boil some of this ink up here in my shop and you were to boil some at home, then our colors are going to be different because all those things come into play when you're trying to reach a certain tone of this color. So I'm pulling now a little bit of ink onto my brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start drawing. So you can see how the color is a light brown. It actually dries in a little bit different way than what is shown here on the page. And what I'm wanting to do with this is just to get just some shapes in here to show you how the color works. Now you at home, if you're actually wanting to go and invest in some inks, you may find that the cost of those inks are pretty substantial. They can run upwards into even hundreds of dollars when you go to buy some really professional inks. But all we're wanting to do is just to sketch some to show you exactly what the walnut ink can give you. Now like I said, my ink's going to look a little bit different than yours, but that's okay because it's all within that range of colors. Now if you're using a brush, you can apply this in ways to get different types of effects, but when you're looking to get this tone though, this particular tone of color, and let's say you don't want to spend all that money, if you have a walnut tree nearby and a pot and a stove and some water, and then at the end a little bit of vinegar, you're going to be able to produce your own ink right from home. Instead of going to a craft store and spending a ton of money on different types of mediums that you could use to reach that look of sepia, you can actually do that in your backyard as long as you have a walnut tree. But remember the basics with this. They have to have their husks. Use equal water per walnut. You also want to be sure and boil it at a slow, medium pace. Strain it over something after it cools, and then add vinegar. Do those steps. You'll end up with some ink of your own right at your home. So, thanks for tuning into Sketches. We hope this has been helpful for you. We hope to do this more actually in between the art workshop. So, until next time, I'm Christopher Epling, and keep drawing.